Welcome to the Salon, a discussion of women's issues with forward editor Jane Eisner. This month on the Salon, women in the Orthodox Rabbinate, the cost of Jewish education, Bernie Madoff's mistress, and healthcare. With our guests, Ruth Messenger, head of the American Jewish World Service and former Manhattan Borough president, Mediaite.com editor Rachel Sklar, Lynn Harris, whose most recent article in the New York Times complained about men who don't rise for pregnant women on the subway, and Bronya Shaffer, a leading writer in the Chabad-Hasidic movement. The closest thing to an Orthodox female pulpit rabbi in America is the newly created title Maharat, a Hebrew acronym for legal, spiritual, and Torah leader. But over the summer of 2009, a religious women's forum in Israel chose a new title for Orthodox women clergy, Rabbah. Clearly, the title of the position is causing as much debate as the idea of Orthodox women in the Rabbinate. Join us with our host, forward editor Jane Eisner.
Lynn, what's in a name?
I see at least two large sides. One is yay. One is great. There's finally, within a movement that is arguably never, ever, ever going to ordain a female rabbi, let us recognize in some way the accomplishments, the achievements, and the potential of women who want to be leaders. Mm-hmm. The other way of looking at it is, okay, but she's a rabbi, and let's face it, rabbis will always feel and sound secondary. And once you accept that secondary position, there's no budging from there ever.
Are we seeing a broader development here? Does this debate about what to call someone bespeak something bigger that's going on in religious circles?
Well, I think in religious communities of all kinds, different faiths, different denominations, there is an expansion of roles, and women are making change in all kinds of communities in all kinds of ways. I think for the better, because I think that women have a particular set of sensibilities and women play particularly valuable roles.
I mean, this is out of necessity as well, because women have, when you talk about, men taking women, putting them in a box and placing a lid on it, well, that's placing a lid on a perspective, like a sphere of knowledge, an ability to communicate.
And half the talent in the world.
Right, that is particular to women. There's
half a perspective of the world.
But it's important to have this specific viewpoint, and it's important for other women to have access to that and for men to have access to that.
And I'll set you a particular example from the field I used to be in, politics. There was a study many years ago as women were beginning to move into the political realm in the United States, in which, thank God, male legislators said, the entire universe of the issues that we now talk about has changed for the better because women got elected to office. Men in state legislatures saying, nobody here ever talked about health care or inequitable salaries or access to daycare until we got women colleagues. And now not only are we talking about it, but we're discovering that it's of critical importance to our constituents, and it just never occurred to us to bring it up.
When the first group, or the first generation, which is basically my generation, of young couples went out to open Chabad centers, they started having a regular annual meeting, a convention for all the male Chabad center leaders, all the shluchim. And some women once came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, spoke to secretary and said, we want to have something for women. To which the response was, there are no female shluchim, there are just wives of shluchim. Okay, so less than 10 years later, the Rebbe asked them to have a convention for shluchat and refer to women as he was a shliach and she was a shluchat. I mean, there was absolutely no in terms of title, no difference. So I found that incredibly reassuring.
And it's recognizing, I think, what Rachel was talking about, which is that those women, before they got their appropriate shlichut title, but before that, they were having influence, they were playing a role, they were bringing a perspective, they were adding activities. They were undoubtedly, I would imagine, being sought out in some instances.
The truth is, Ruth, as society changed, so did the Jewish world and the Orthodox society and hasidic world also changes.
I think we also ought to at least put on this table for today and future discussions at the Salon the role of women in the Jewish community where there aren't complicated issues of halakha, because women are, in many ways, second-class citizens in the not-for-profit Jewish community in a way that is not kept pace with what else is happening in American life. None of the 19 large city federations in the United States has ever had a woman director. I would argue that Jewish organizations, all denominations, all backgrounds, don't reflect in their personnel policies the commitment to core Jewish values that we say we espouse. Not only do men not stand up on the subway for pregnant women, and I love that.
On-site daycare. in these
But exactly,
organizations.
there's virtually no
Where else
on-site
have they been?
daycare. We are not the most progressive community in terms of flex time, and we are certainly doing badly when it comes to family-friendly policies, maternity leave, and health benefits.
Well, you know, free up that bottlenecks, and I think that you would see an opening up of the entire structure. Get women more involved, and I think that is a great first step.
The cost of Jewish education has long been an issue for even the upper middle class in Jewish life, causing what some are calling a tuition crisis. And this year in particular, many Jewish parents are feeling the squeeze.
As someone who made sure to give her children a private Jewish education, how do you see the future of day schools playing out, Bronya?
I think there has to be a real commitment to Jewish continuity, Jewish education. That means not, okay, once I have all of the, once I have I'm comfortably ensconced in the material life that I've aspired to, now I can think about whether or not my children. That's not a real commitment.
It's really hard. I mean, we are the people in this pickle right now. I mean, we, as I said, Bess is almost 3. She's going to be going to a Jewish preschool this fall. But our dream is to send her to Jewish day school. Our dream is also to feed and clothe our other child, and and have shelter. So we are those people. We are the ones who probably won't be able to do it, and it makes us really sad. I did not go to Jewish day school. I turned out fine, even married a rabbi. But I went to religious school in my synagogue growing up. But even that, you need to be a member of the synagogue, which is not inexpensive. So it's true. There needs to be some other way of how do we make this accessible?
Infrastructure is key. And just saying that is making me realize how much of I also didn't go to Jewish day school, but I went to Hebrew school and Sunday school. So 3 days a week after school I had Jewish education. I went to Jewish summer camp. Yeah, all of this costs money. But I also had the infrastructure of the home, which is when I think now, as I sort of have been in the process of writing a book about contemporary Jewish identity, I realize, oh my God, I learned so much. Just from watching my mom.
Mm-hmm. Ruth, you take a global view of these issues, and certainly the challenge of education for girls and women is just enormous in the rest of the world. What do we do to mesh our own values with promoting the education of those who really need it?
Part of what I want to see in any educational context, public, private, religious, is that we help the young people of this century understand the problems of the world, the problems for women, the problems of lack of access to education for children in general and for girl children in particular. So those are very big, broad issues, but they come back into this discussion we were having about what do we teach our children, both at home and in these schools, that will give them the worldview that's necessary for them to be leaders in many different communities moving forward.
But it is an interesting question for Jewish institutions. I mean, in terms of the education, just to compare apples and oranges, the Catholic Church, there is a connection between the schools and the church, and there's money there for the schools, and so the schools are more accessible, as far as I understand, and we don't have the same structure to begin with. So the money, if there were to be any sort of support for Jewish education, it would have to come from federations or from philanthropy, and that's not the way they're set up right now. So it's a really big sort of Jewish institutional question across denominations and across organizations need to be asked, can we figure out how to support education?
I would agree with you. I want to put a little bit of emphasis on quality.
Yes.
It's the quality of certain Jewish camps, certain Jewish schools, both day and supplementary, certain Jewish service and service learning programs. Because if you do bad quality, then the instinct to get more and more money and more people involved will fritter away.
But who gets to determine what's good quality and what's bad quality?
But But the community does. But the community needs to be more transparent about how important it is to get people to do teaching, how important it is to pay for teachers, and to help teachers teach well, because that's a way to encourage more Jewish learning in all of these different programs, all of these different levels.
I think it's important also, and again, coming from a very personal perspective, just being inspired about being Jewish. Kids get inspired, and that inspiration stays with them. So there's a commitment to something that then promotes.
Right, and again, I think exactly what you're saying is to keep sort of looking at what are the elements that create that inspiration.
But I think there definitely are gradations. Like when a Chabad house's idea of what an appropriate Jewish education might be very different from a Reconstructionist version or very Reform. My first experience actually with what I perceived to be Jewish sexism was at a Chabad house, because I didn't know where I was going. It was my first, I had just gotten to college and I'd been invited to a Friday night dinner at Chabad, and the rabbi leading it, I went up to introduce myself and shake his hand, and he politely looked at me and did not take my extended hand. I was like, why isn't he shaking my hand? What did I do? And sort of like grappling with that, the notions of not touching women and sort of the more Orthodox notions. I mean, that's a different sort of education to impart to children, and so these are other things to take into account when considering Jewish education.
But core Jewish values, like tzedakah, philanthropy, like caring for other people, like being concerned. I mean, well, okay, I can't help it. I'm a Jewish mother. I got to get a little plug here. My son-in-law, a Chabad rabbi, is donating a kidney to someone. And he's a young father of 9 children. A lot of people thought that perhaps it wasn't the thing to do. And nevertheless, he said, it's saving somebody's life, and in a very, very real way. He said, everything I've learned all my life, everything I want to teach my children, what greater teaching could I give them than what's more important than saving a life?
You are more than entitled to cavil right here.
No topic has captivated the Jewish community in the past year more than Bernie Madoff. In the latest twist in that saga, the former CFO of Hadassah claims that she was having an affair with Madoff while investing with him.
What's it been like to see this story play out in the media?
My perception of Hadassah does not change because of the antics of Madoff. I don't think it's a bad reflection on Hadassah, just as I don't think that it's a bad reflection on Elie Wiesel, that his foundation invested in Madoff Securities. And the unfortunate thing is that Bernie Madoff was the rotten apple that infected everything else in the barrel.
But doesn't this also raise some bigger questions here? Should we have tighter conflict of interest rules when it comes to investing Jewish communal money?
Well, I think the answer to that is yes, but for me that's not restricted to the Jewish community, and it's not restricted to the not-for-profit community. What we saw in the profitable, for a while, schemes or antics, I like that word, of Bernie Madoff, caught many, many individuals, smaller philanthropists and donors, and many not-for-profits up in the problems. And it argues for me to generally a need for tough conflict of interest and, frankly, a more serious engagement by all of us in business ethics.
So you raise an interesting point about business ethics. Is there a responsibility for Jewish leadership to really promote that?
The conflict of interest issue is interesting because the Jewish community being what it is, I wonder if you'd ever be able to really sort things out so separately that, that you'd find no conflict of interest at all. I think what has to be underscored is a very strong infusion of personal character, integrity.
Bronya, I agree with you. I would just make one technical point, and that is that almost all conflict of interest regulations don't require that there be no conflict, no cross-relationship. They simply require that you say so. Therefore, basically what I would say they require is transparency, which seems to me to be missing today in a great many dealings.
Well, because as you say, there's no way that people aren't going to know each other. I mean, we all went to camp together. There's
and you're trying to set me up with your brother-in-law, or
right, it's going to happen.
But Bronya, you also raised an interesting point, and that is character. How do we monitor that?
Yeah, it's establishing a community that has clear values. People are clear about the values of the community, and a community is made up of individuals.
But Lynn, you're raising 2 young children now. Is it harder than you expected to be able to instill those values in your children?
Well, one of them is only 9 months, so with him it's very easy at this point. We just say no. But it's
That's tough.
It's,
Say no.
and just pick him up and put him somewhere else. Can't do that with grown-ups so much, or even with my nearly 3-year-old. Even I first noticed a bit of a gender difference between my husband and me before she was even born, because I was worried about like how will we get to the hospital, what do I need to pack, and what will I eat as soon as she's born. And my husband was like, how will we handle her moral development? But now we are coming up, now that I have eaten and we're moving on, we realize all we do is tell her no. On the other hand, they just talked on NPR about how you're not supposed to praise them too much, you know, so.
Hold on a second, a Jewish mother is not supposed to praise her children?
Right, not gonna happen. My mother will kill me, right?
Well, Jewish mothers today aren't what Jewish mothers are, and you know.
I think Lynn is raising exactly the right questions. It's like, how do we think about this? How do we provide support to each other as a community? And those of us whose children are older will tell you, you know what? Eventually, you learn to forget the small stuff. You know, I have a child. I would say he's 45. He's a professor. He didn't wear a jacket most of his childhood because eventually I decided that I was going to get arrested for child abuse, struggling the jacket back on him on the street, and that since he never got sick, that was not something that had to do with his moral development. I could just let it go. But it was very hard. And guess what? He's a parent, successful professional.
Chilly, but
That's right.
You know, I think that setting a wonderful example is one of the best things you can do, and not only for children, but just generally as, you know, as you take on leadership roles in the community, you know, in the Jewish community and beyond.
The healthcare debates working their way through Congress will impact every one of us, and many in the Jewish community are voicing particular opinions on these issues.
Is there a Jewish ethic that can be applied to this healthcare debate?
What troubles me is that I don't see enough Jewish community organizations speaking out on public health care issues. And there are literally people who are falling, I'm going to say it the way I see it, falling prey to inappropriate advertising and organizing, going to say to their members of Congress, we don't want a public option, please protect my Medicare. So there's like, I mean, that's like really crazy. But it's an issue where Jewish organizations ought to be heard, Jewish organizations that are involved in policy issues, because the Jewish community has the capacity to be a significant lever in promoting good public policy.
well, that's true from we have the example of Massachusetts, where, and there have been speed bumps, obviously, but it was out of community organizing by religious groups, including the religious community in Massachusetts, that it was those groups that created the universal coverage in Massachusetts. That was
Absolutely.
it. I mean,
greater,
there it is.
Greater Boston Interfaith Organizing
Yes.
effort, in which the Boston Jewish Community Relations Council and Federation played a huge role in mobilizing synagogues.
And that's all
Absolutely.
the values that you've been talking about. I mean, it says over and over in the Torah, we have to take care of the widow and the orphan. And why widow and the orphan? What they're talking about is the people who don't have the support of the structures of society, parents, husbands, as it was then. And there it is. I mean, we have to.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our panel, Ruth Messenger, Rachel Sklar, Lynn Harris, and Bronya Shaffer. Please join us again soon.
The Salon is a joint production between the Jewish Channel and the Forward. You can continue to discuss Jewish women's issues at the Forward's new women's blog, The Sisterhood. If you have any thoughts on this show or other topics you'd like to see addressed on The Salon, send us an email at thesalon@tjctv.com.